So for about 1,000 years, hill forts were all the rage. That's what people were using. That's what people were into, and that worked. But then a bunch of French guys came over and started changing all that and built these things instead. So this, well, not this is a play park, but this is a bailey. And behind this bailey is a raised mound of earth called a motte. And what a motte and bailey is a significant change in both the way that militarily castles were being used and in the culture behind those castles. Well, this big open piece of ground was a bailey, and a bailey was a defensive structure. It was still on a raised piece of ground, and it had great views out across the surrounding countryside. But what it was used for was that in times of strife, all the animals and livestock and the peasants, which is going to come in important in a minute, they would all be brought into this bit as a defensive stockade to protect them from whoever happened to be invading. But then there was another part to this castle that was a defensive structure, and that's up there. So behind the bailey was this mound here called a motte, and this was where the castle, so to speak, was built. I mean, we're still talking like a proto-castle here. It was a wooden structure, but this is where the local lord would be sitting when someone attacked. That's where they'd hang out. And it kind of demonstrates quite a sociological difference in that on the hill fort, the idea was you took the village and you put them all in a defensive structure at the top, and everybody from the chief to the lowliest person in the tribe worked as a whole to defend themselves. But now you have this idea where there are the common folk who have the bailey as their defensive structure, but then the rich people, the people who own the land and the bosses, they get to have their own extra defensive structure, so that if this pit falls, they've still got a chance of surviving, because the hope is that the invading people would come in and go, great, we've got loads of cattle, let's take all that and go. And then they wouldn't bother with the difficult to attack motte. So the idea was peasants down there, rich people up here. And the other thing is that this type of castle only appeared in Wales around about 1,500 years after hill forts, because Norman invaders had turned up around 1066. Now, that was a conquest. And the thing about being somebody who's on a conquest is that you need a different kind of structure. Now, a hill fort in Wales, that's something a village builds, or that's something a small tribe builds, because it's there for hundreds of years, they're not going anywhere, they want somewhere that protects as much of what they've got as they can. Whereas a motte and bailey is more like an invasive castle. It's the kind of castle that you want to build fairly quickly so that you can establish a foothold in an area without having to spend the manpower and resource it takes to build something like a hill fort. So these motte and bailey type castles are almost like structures of invasion rather than defensive structures. You see, in the previous 1,000 years or so, the Welsh hadn't really been invaded. The Romans and the Anglo-Saxons and the other peoples of the time, they'd gone into England and they'd set up kingdoms in England, but they just left Wales alone because it was full of mad Welsh people who'd throw rocks at them. But the Normans had ambition, so they went for this kind of structure because they wanted to try and use military force to take on Wales. And let's see how that went for them.